Am I audible? I hope.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
So the recording has started as promised. First, let us start with our last topic in the failure of composites, which is the Puck failure criteria. Okay. So is my presentation visible?
Yes,
Yes,
sir.
sir.
So Puck failure criteria is a failure criteria which is, they position it like a micromechanical damage, but it is actually phenomenological, and I will explain why it is like that. So what this failure criteria does is that there are 5 different failure modes in unidirectional composites according to this failure criteria, which is tensile compressive fiber fracture, tensile interfiber fracture, shear interfiber fracture, and compressive interfiber fracture. Okay, Hashin failure criteria had 4. Puck has introduced a 5th failure criteria. So tensile fiber and compressive fiber is, I think, straightforward. In the fiber direction, if you apply above a certain load, it is going to fail. Or if you apply compressive load below a certain limit, it is going to compress and it's going to fail. Additionally, there are 3 more fiber failure modes if the loading is not in the fiber direction. They said that it could be tensile in the transverse direction where the crack is for exactly 90 degrees to the loading, or it could be shear. Shear is actually a combination where the crack is above a certain angle when you are looking at angle and the loading direction. In this figure, you are seeing only shear load being applied, but it could be a combination of tau 12 and sigma 12 such that the crack is not at 90 degrees to the loading direction, but at some angle to the principal stress direction. And the third is compressive fracture in the transverse direction. As we had discussed that if you have transverse direction and if you apply compressive load, it is going to fail at an 45 degree, which we had discussed, I think, before our first test. So according to the Puck failure criteria, there are these 5 formulas. For tensile fiber fracture, they have said sometimes it is, if you see carefully, it is a combination of both strain and stress. And M subscript sigma F is material constant. Similarly, for tensile interfiber fracture, you have a complex formula, but then also there are some material constants here, like this one, this, this. So basically, there are 5 formulas. If you look at it from a graphical point of view, and if we look at the mode ABC, then basically what the authors have done is they have conducted a large number of tests and tried to curve fit the data into some sort of shape like this, some sort of ellipse or polynomial like this. And the different curve fit parameters of the polynomials are your material constants, P transverse parallel plus R transverse, etc., etc. To get all the data of this, all the data that you need for your Puck failure criteria, you will have to do an extremely large number of tests. So as you can imagine, if you want to do lots of tests and fit it to a closed polynomial like this, you will need such a large amount of data. Also keep in mind that there is going to be scatter. So practically, if you want to run this, if you want to do tests, collect all the data and then find out the value of the material constants is practically impossible. It is extremely huge. So what most softwares are doing, this has been implemented in ANSYS. They will ask you whether it is glass fiber or carbon fiber. And depending on the glass fiber and carbon fiber, they have some sort of guess values for these constants. And then you can run the simulations. But again, it is largely empirical. You collect large amount of data, curve fit it on a base of series of equations, and then you will get the failure criteria. Getting the material constants by experiments is very difficult. So softwares which have implemented this will just ask you whether it is glass or carbon, and then based on that, they are going to put some data. Also, if you look at this plot this region where sigma 1, sigma 2 both are positive, or sigma 2 is positive, sigma 1, 2 is positive or negative, corresponds to mode A. Mode A is tensile failure in the transverse direction. Mode B is shear failure in the transverse direction. And mode C is compression. So depending on which equation, and so basically this curve, the red line that you see, has been broken into three parts. First part is A, B, second part is BC, third part is CD. If you go back one slide, this is the equation for AB. This is the equation for BC. This is the equation for CD. Okay. So any questions on this Puck failure criteria? So actually, it is no wonder that the Puck failure criteria performed best during the failure exercise, because it requires the most amount of input data. If you have the most amount of input data and you try to curve fit, the fit is going to get better and better as you increase the amount of data that you have put. Okay, any question?
So could you go back a slide? Could you go back to the previous slide?
This one?
Yes, so what are these R1, R perpendicular A? In the last formula.
1 minute. Let's put everything in this slide so that we can see. So R22 is this distance. Can you see? I think R22 is R perpendicular. Actually, I have read two different textbooks. It is this length. And P, etc. are the slopes of the tangent at when it meets the intercept, etc. Some basically you are curve fitting into the smooth curve, this mode A, mode B, mode C. I think this R22A is R transverse A. Clear? Done?
Yes, sir.
Okay, any questions? So this brings me to the end of our discussion on damage of composites. Okay, so as you can, I think, appreciate, damage of composites is still a ongoing topic of research. Every day people are making newer theories, newer ways of doing it. The state of the art is that if you can, there are ways of calculating initiation of damage by different criteria, that combined with FE for doing progressive damage seems to getting mature and seems to work, but there are still lots of gray areas. And this Puck failure criteria also, when you implement it in ANSYS, the loss of stiffness or progressive damage is based on the same ideas as we have studied for the Hashim failure criteria. Also keep in mind that this Puck failure criteria is only going to work for unidirectional continuous fiber. If you have short fiber, chop strand mat, these theories of failures will not necessarily work. But it is ongoing work. It is state of the art. People are working on it. Hopefully today we know more than we knew yesterday. Tomorrow we will know more than we know today. But it's an active field of research, and I try to teach this topic like that, from that bent, that what people are doing in the industry, what is happening, rather than taking it from a textbook point of view, because this is a 5th year elective course or a 2nd year elective course depending on the course. So that has been the philosophy. This brings me to the end of damage of composites. Any questions, comments overall on this? So let us recall what have we studied. We studied how to calculate the stress to failure and strain to failure if you have a composite which is subjected to loading in the off axis direction, uniaxial load in the off axis direction. This is number one. After that, or number two, we studied what are the tensorial way of writing damage and how do you identify the different parameters. And based on that general framework, we were able to find out different theories of failures like Sahil, Hoffman, etc. Then we learned about Hasian failure criteria. We discussed how it has been implemented in software Abacus. After that, we had the worldwide failure exercise, where we learned that even though in this course we learned about small number of theories of failure, but there are actually large number of theories of failure which are prevalent, and none of them are perfect. Sometimes they will work, sometimes they will not work. Then we studied progressive damage, what are the different ways of doing progressive damage, and then finally it is margin of safety. So these are broadly the different topics that we have discussed. Okay, did I miss anything? I think not. I think these are the different damage. So can I go to my next topic for this course?
Yes.
Damage is done. Damage is clear. The present 1-2 more presentations I am going to upload. For example, Puck failure criteria. I'm going to upload progressive damage. I'm going to upload. There are also YouTube videos which I have created for these topics, which I might share. And then we'll close. So damage is a very important topic from your next exam point of view, obviously, but also very important if you get to a design job where composites are being used, or if you end up doing a PhD in the field of composites. So damage is very, very important from that point of view. After damage, the next logical thing is to study fatigue. So damage is when you take a composite and you apply load in a quasi-static manner till it fails. We have studied those things in the damage of composites. And in fatigue, the composite is not subjected to load up till the upper limit or to the ultimate tensile strength, but rather it is applied cyclically. And one of the reasons why composites gained a lot of use is that its fatigue properties are very, very nice. So once we understand damage, it is now logically the next step is for us to understand about fatigue of composite materials. And my PhD was also on fatigue of composites. So this is a topic which I find very interesting. Okay. So first of all, what is meant by fatigue? When we talk about fatigue, we mean to say that there is a body which is subjected to cyclic loading. It increases up to a certain limit and then it comes down, it increases, then comes down. In this figure, the mean is stress level 0, which might or might not be the case. I mean to say that the loading could be like this also, where it is always in a state of tension, or it could be always in a state of compression. It could be any, but it is cyclically, it is increasing, it is decreasing. This we usually plot in what is known as a SN curve. In an SN curve, in the x-axis, you will put number of cycles in the log scale, and in the y-axis, you will put maximum stress. Sometimes it is a normal scale, sometimes it is a log scale. So you will have log-log or semi-log plots you are going to build and apply a certain load cyclically till the sample fails and note down the cycles to failure. So this is one data point. This you will fit to a certain equation. This is the SN curve. SN curve, you can characterize the damage, you can characterize the fatigue behavior of any material, not only composite, but also metal. This is basic idea. Now, for metals, what happens is you apply cyclic load and there is a crack initiation, and almost after crack initiation, your material will fail. So the crack propagation phase in a metal is very limited. It is not going to propagate. Almost all crack initiations are catastrophic in nature. Whereas in composites, half of the life is spent in initiating the crack, but even after initiating the crack, there is a significant time where there is crack propagation. It is because of this new propagation phase in composite materials, composites usually behave better in the field of better when subjected to fatigue loading as compared to composite material. This is a fundamental difference between fatigue of metals and fatigue of composites. Another way of looking at it is to imagine on the y-axis you are seeing the damage size, and on the x-axis you are seeing the number of cycles or time. When we are talking about damage size, for metals it means crack length. For composites it could mean a large number of things. It could mean broken fibers, delamination, matrix cracking, composite cracking, debond, voids, etc., etc. Initially, the imperfections in composites are higher than the imperfections in metals. Metals typically will have close to 0% voids, very few defects and imperfections. Composites can have some imperfections. Now, as you apply the load, this damage size and these imperfections will grow, both for metals as well as for composites. Metals, it is very slow, and once you reach some critical size, it immediately breaks. So this time is very limited. If you have reached a damage size which is of a critical size, it is going to fail. This is known as catastrophic failure. Okay, and the inspection threshold. If you have advanced imaging techniques, these are the limits which you can inspect and find out that there is damage. So our metals provide a very small window of doing something about the crack, which is this window. For composites, the damages are increasing continuously, but despite the number of damages, it can still go on and on and on, and finally it will fail. So the fatigue cycles, typically you can expect for a composite materials to be higher, but initiation of damage in a composite is going to be likely much earlier. So damage will start earlier, but since damage is not catastrophic in the context of composite materials, the lifetime that you can expect is going to be higher for composite materials. Okay. Another perspective, another way of comparing metals and composites would be to do the following. On the y-axis, you can make stiffness, and on the x-axis, you can make number of cycles. Okay, and this is normalized stiffness. So if the stiffness was 1, then metal more or less remains 1 or 0.99 for a large amount of time, and then it suddenly breaks. Composite, there is a gradual and slow loss of stiffness, and it keeps on going before it finally breaks. So this loss of stiffness in a metal, you don't need to model. Even if you model for this number of cycles, you are good. But for composites, if you start modeling this number of cycles, you are missing out on a large number of possible cycles that the composites could have. Is this clear? The point that I'm trying to make, that you have to account for progressive damage and loss of stiffness for composites. For metals, if you don't do it, is fine because damage is catastrophic. For composites, it is not the case. Okay, so any questions about comparison of fatigue of metal and composite? Can I go forward?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so fatigue of unidirectional composites, when it is subjected to tension, when it is subjected to loading, when it is subjected to loading in the longitudinal direction, there is a professor whose name is Ramesh Talreja. He proposed that we should break all the fatigue data into three parts. Okay. In the first part, there is hardly any loss of strength or the strain to failure. If you apply a certain amount of strain, it could fail anywhere between 10 to the power 2 to 10 to the power 3 or 4 cycles. This is high cycle. And then you have intermediate cycle, where as the applied strain loading is decreasing, the number of cycles it can sustain is increasing, and this is almost linear. And this is also almost independent of the volume fraction. And if the applied load is above a certain limit, Professor Talreja says that if it is above the strain to failure of the neat matrix, then maybe my composite is going to not fail at all. It is going to suffer. It is able to take that load for infinite number of cycles. When you have low cycle fatigue, most likely what is going to happen is one fiber fails, then few fiber fails, and then a crack path develops like this, and your composite breaks into two. At intermediate cycles, you have both fiber as well as matrix cracking, and the matrix crack could be around the fiber. And finally, at very low strains, where it is suffering from infinite number of cycles, more or less it is only matrix cracks, there are no fiber cracks. So this figure actually tells you that even though the loading is in the longitudinal direction, in fatigue, it is not necessary that you will have fiber failure. Depending on what type of load that you have applied, how much is the magnitude, different things might happen. Okay. Now, if you have ultra high modulus fiber, then there is only one region in the fatigue curve. So for a normal composite, for a normal or a ordinary fiber composite, we have seen that the fatigue data can be divided into three parts: high cycle fatigue, low cycle fatigue, high, low, intermediate. But if I have ultra high modulus fiber, then my fiber stiffness is so high that the matrix is hardly taking any load. And in that case, you will never have, so those materials you can expect it to last for an infinite number of cycles. Actually, this one plot is explaining why composites became very attractive for the aerospace industry, where people built carbon fiber laminates, tried to test it under fatigue, and they found out that even though the applied load was almost as high as the ultimate tensile strength, still the composite material was not failing at 10 to the power 6, 10 to the power 8 cycles. So the hypothesis was that maybe composites don't fatigue at all. We have found out that they do fatigue, but if you see, it is the number of cycles is very, very high if you are able to use ultra high modulus fibers, like carbon fibers which have high modulus. Intermediate high fiber failure, you have the three different regions, but the strain to failure is higher. Okay. This idea of Ramesh Talreja was given in the 80s. It is slightly outdated and people no longer believe this, but it is very useful to give a physical understanding of what happens when you subject your composite materials to cyclic loading. If you apply off-axis loading, then as the theta increases, the stress, the SN curve or the strain and log n curve will also start coming downward. So if theta is 5 degree, I have this curve. This is 5 degree. This is 10 degree. This is 30 degree. This is 60 degree, etc., etc. So all of them, the curve varies, and for every number of cycles, the relationship is different. So for example, if I do an interpolation of 3 data in 10 to the power 6, I am going to get different values. If I plot theta versus strain to failure for 10 to the power 6 cycles, I am going to get a different plot as compared to if it is 10 to the power 2 cycles. Orientation is very important at 10 to the power 2 cycles, probably not so important at 10 to the power 6 cycles. So all of these are complications which we will face for composite materials, not for metals. For metal, there is no concept of off-axis loading because your metal is isotropic. and these curves are slightly, we'll see later, they are slightly smoother. So when you are doing fatigue analysis of composite material, these are all the different factors that you have to understand. So this is the fatigue of UD composite under angle theta, and we are finding out the endurance strength. So the endurance strength varies non-linearly as a function of the loading, as a function of the loading angle. And this is something that it is hard to analytically derive. Keep in mind that stiffness also, we had similar curves, we use tensor rotation. However, for fatigue, you cannot do that because damage is localized. Another problem is the loss of stiffness. So as I had described a few slides earlier, this one, composites will suffer from continuous loss of stiffness. So what does that continuous loss of stiffness lead to? Continuous loss of stiffness means that where the stresses were high or where the strains were high, the damage will be high. So if the damage is high, stiffness will come down. If stiffness will come down, stress will become low. So the stress that a point was taking now has to be redistributed to its neighboring points. So continuously there is loss of stiffness and there is continuous redistribution of stress that is taking place. So you cannot simulate fatigue of composites like you would simulate fatigue of metals using the Paris equation or Soderberg equation. All of that will not be valid. Okay, if you have cross-ply laminates, it has been shown that the secant modulus decreases in the same way as the transverse crack increases. They are correlated. This is proven experimentally, and also by numerical studies you can prove this. So as the crack increases, the secant modulus decreases. Do you know what is secant modulus? Anybody? Let's say this is my stress strain curve. What is the secant modulus? What is the Young's modulus? How do I calculate Young's modulus from this?
So the ratio of stress per strain up to proportional limit.
Maybe the slope of this line, correct?
Yes, sir.
Yes.
So secant modulus is basically, let's say I want to calculate the secant modulus here. So I have to join these two lines. The slope of this line is the secant modulus at this strain. And secant modulus will be different for different values of strain. So for example, let's choose another one. If I want the secant modulus here, then I have this. So secant modulus at strain A is the slope of the purple line, at B it is slope of the green line. Basically you are drawing secants to the curve and then calculating the modulus. You have secant modulus, you also have tangent modulus. What is tangent modulus? Tangent modulus is if you draw a tangent at this point. The slope of this tangent of the curve is the tangent modulus. So we are saying that for the same loading that is corresponding to point A, if after cycle 1 this is the slope, maybe after large number of cycles the slope of this line will further come down, which is shown by this curve. This is directly happening due to the transverse cracks that are happening at the around the fibers. Okay, is this clear? This is a very unique phenomena to composite material which increases the difficulties that we have while understanding composites. Is this clear?
Sir.
And also another point is that if we normalize all the curves based on the static strength, okay, so 0 degree has some strength, I normalize it. So at 10 to the power 1 cycle, at 10 to the power 0 cycle, that is one cycle, that is basically your UTS, ultimate tensile strength. So if I plot all the fatigue data with respect to the tensile strength for that, so the 0-degree curve is normalized for the UTS for 0 degree, 90 degrees normalized for 90 degrees, so on and so forth. Then we see that even if we normalize it with the UTS, the slopes of the different line are going to be different. Like a 0 degree, there is hardly any drop of strength up to 10 to the power 1 cycle, 10 to the power 2 cycles, and then it drops suddenly. And all others are almost linear if normalized to the ultimate tensile strength. This is 1. Okay, 0 degree is normalized with the UTS for 0 degree, 90 degree is normalized for the 90 degree, so on and so forth. So even if you are able to calculate the damage, ultimate tensile strength, and if you think you can normalize and get the fatigue properties, that is also not the case. That you can safely do for some metals, you cannot do that for composite material. Okay, so this is the comparison between 090 and 0 degree composite materials. So there are many things here which you need to understand. Do you understand what is R is equal to 0.1? This is something that all of you must have studied in your design of machine elements course. What do we mean by R ratio?
Stress ratio, sir.
How do you define it?
Sigma min by sigma max, sir.
Sigma min by sigma max. Yes. So R is equal to 0.1. It means that sigma min is positive, sigma max is also positive, correct? If I tell you R is equal to 0.1, what does that mean? This is sigma, this is time. It means that minimum is somewhere here and this is 0. Maximum is somewhere here and minimum by maximum is 0.1. So it is tension loading. Something like this. What is this 10 hertz? What does this tell us?
So the frequency of loading.
The frequency. Now, compared to metals, we cannot use very high frequency loading for composite materials because they will heat up. And thermoplastics or the heating that you get due to cyclic loading will not alter the properties so much. But if you use a composite and you start testing at very high frequencies, then you are going to run into trouble of heating, and then you are actually applying a mechanical and thermal load on your sample. So the SN curve that you get is not correct. Okay, usual practice is that you will put a thermocouple on the samples, load it at 5 hertz, 10 hertz, note the temperature difference. If the temperature difference is more than 5 degrees on the surface of your sample, it means that you must go to a lower frequency. Do you know what is a thermocouple?
Yes, sir.
Thermocouple is basically a device to capture the change in temperature. And what is RT? RT stands for room temperature, right? So when you do a test, you have to specify everything. Now, this is T800. This is Toray 800 high modulus carbon fiber composite. Okay. Now, y-axis is log in stress, x-axis is log in number of cycles. You see that the data is almost linear. Okay. And 0 degrees ultimate tensile strength is 2247 megapascal for this composite. At 10 to the power 6 cycles, it is 1000. Similarly, for 90 degrees, 090, it is 1432, drops down to 750. Does anybody know what is the ratio of ultimate tensile strength to endurance limit for metals?
0.9, sir.
0.9, that's very high. Are you sure?
0.5, sir.
Even lower, actually, it is 0.33 or something. So for metals, this curve would be a lot sharper. I mean, this is almost parallel. For composites, this is almost parallel to the y-axis. But for metals, it would almost be like this. The slope of this line is known as the K ratio. And the slope is higher for composite materials. It is flatter for composites, higher for metals. Okay, so these are the basic differences between metals and composites. There is no or little damage progression in metals, long progression after initiation for composites. Single crack leads to catastrophic failure, extremely large number of cracks for composites. Metals, there is no orientation dependence. Composites, there is orientation dependence. There is no loss of stiffness for metals. There is loss of stiffness and stress redistribution for composite. Each type of composite will behave differently, even if the fiber and the matrix is the same. And this brings me to the differences between metals and composites. Any questions on this? If not, then the next topic that I want to discuss is how can we do the simulation of fatigue? How can you do the modeling? How can you understand the mechanics of fatigue of composites? What are the different challenges? So the first challenge is that in general, the scatter in fatigue properties for composite materials is higher than that of metals. This is because there are more defects, there are more variability in the composite materials. How do we quantify scatter for fatigue properties? So what we normally do is that we are going to plot. So these markers are all the datas. You will fit it to a power equation. Suppose it is like this, y is equal to this to the power this, and form the confidence limits, the upper bound and the lower bound. So these dotted lines are the confidence intervals. Using basic statistics, we can say that 90% of the data points are going to last between these two dotted lines. This is known as the 90% confidence interval. The ratio of the upper and the lower bound of the 90% confidence interval is known as T sigma. T sigma is an indicator of the scatter in the fatigue properties. For composite materials, it is of the order of 1.2, 1.3. For metals, it is 1.05. So invariably, there is more scatter, there are more randomness. So if you look at this data, what does this mean physically? It means that for the same amount of load, let's say this data point and this data point, the number of cycles to failure could be 2000, could be 20,000, could be 200,000. If you watch carefully, these data points, this data point and this data point, or this group of data points, are all having more or less the same number of load. Yes, the load level is similar. It is this level. But the number of cycles varies from 2000 to almost 900,000 or 90,000. In metals, you are not going to get such a large amount of scatter. And this variation, so this T sigma will not be so high. So somehow you are dealing with a more variable. And keep in mind that by your modeling, you are only going to get one number. You are not going to get the entire band. So this is a challenge. The second challenge is that in metals, there is a clear-cut endurance strength. Endurance strength is defined as the maximum load the material can bear, even if it is repeated for infinite number of cycles. So for metals, the curve gets asymptomatic after a certain number of cycles to failure. So this curve is actually now going like this. So then it is clear-cut that below this stress limit, even if I increase the number of cycles to very high number, it is not going to change so much. My material is going to survive. For composite, the curve might or might not get symptomatic. It does not get asymptomatic every time. So there is no such demarcation line. There is, so you'll put a limit of 10 to the power 6 cycles as the limit for infinite. And so, but this is hard to derive this limit numerically. Where do you understand where it is going to be when does my curve start behaving symptomatic? And for most applications, endurance strength is the most important property for us. If there is a stress value where I know that my part is going to survive infinite number of cycles, and if I have the budget, that is, I'm going to do the analysis based on that. That is hard to derive for composite. So this is the second challenge. The third challenge is the loss of stiffness. Loss of stiffness means that the FE calculation, the local stress predictions will have to be updated every time. If you apply a certain load, the stress at every point is a function of the stiffness at that point. If the stiffness is continuously changing, you can expect that the stress will also continuously change. As the stiffness reduces, the local stress should also change. Accounting for this loss of stiffness is a major challenge while modeling fatigue of composite materials. Okay. You can do an FE analysis. You can determine the regions with high stress. And based on that value of high stress, you can use Paris equation for metals and you can calculate the number of cycles to failure. The same cannot be done for composites because continuous loss of stiffness is continuous redistribution of stresses. So it is possible that the same component, the same part in the same component can have different stress at cycle number 1 or 2, but after cycle number n, that same point might change even though the cyclic loading is constant. So this is a very big challenge. Or in other words, you have what is known as multi-scaling, but at the temporal. Temporal means your challenges are there are phenomena happening at different time scales, but which is at different time scales. For example, the values in the stress change is very rapid. Less than 1 second, it changes from low to high to low to high. If my frequency is 10 hertz, the change in stress value is happening almost 10 times every second. But the loss of stiffness is very gradual. This is happening in thousands of cycles. Thousands of cycles also means thousands of seconds or hundreds of seconds. So you have to model this damage, these two events which are happening at two completely different time scales. If you start modeling at the change in stress values, then the amount of computation you have to do for millions of cycles, it will not be practical. However, if you only look at the slow change in stiffness at thousands of cycle stage, you will miss out on details. So we know that the mechanics of composites is multi-scale, but we found out that the fatigue of composites is multi-scale both from a length scale but also from a time scale. So to solve this, we will usually implement what is known as the cycle jump approach. In the cycle jump approach, typically you will model one cycle, calculate based on the Paris equation and the SN curve what is the damage that you expect, interpolate it to a large number of cycles such that the damage is above a certain limit. So let's say dn by ddn. If you see at the end of first cycle, the damage is 0.01. And you have said that your FE calculations must repeat at whenever damage is at 0.1. So from cycle number 1 to cycle number 10, you are going to basically assume that the state of damage is same. At cycle 10, you will rerun your FE calculations with the new calculated stiffness. And after some time, you are going to do your cycle jump 2 and 3. So based on this idea, you can actually simulate millions of cycles, but you are running the FE only 5 or 8 or 10 number of times, rather than at the end of every load cycle, calculating the stiffness, rerunning the FE calculations, running millions of FE simulations is not practical. This is a challenge, and this is something that you have to do for composites, but you don't have to do for metals. Okay, and of course, spatial multiscaling, which you are already aware of, that the damage happens at the matrix and fiber length, which is micron level, but you are trying to do lifetime predictions of the component, which is meter length. So because of this, somehow if you start modeling everything at the matrix and fiber length, then when you make the life part, which is meter length, you will have such a big FE model that you will never be able to run the simulations. However, if you only model the component, then you will miss out on the details which are happening at the fiber and the matrix level. and so your fatigue simulation will not be accurate. So this is our problem is multi-scale. Any questions on the temporal and the multi-scale challenges or the different challenges about fatigue of composites that we have discussed? Think about it. You can ask me anything. Everything is clear?
Yes, sir.
For sure? Okay. Good. If everything is clear, I'm happy. Or should I repeat something? Huh? Feel free. This is your class. Okay. So another challenge is the orientation dependence. Okay. Because of orientation dependence, multi-axial fatigue is challenging for isotropic materials. But for composite materials, because of the orientation dependence, the problem is going to rise exponentially. And as of today, I can confidently say there are no established methods where you could do the multi-axial fatigue simulation for composite materials. If there is multi-axial loading involved, no simulation is anywhere close to satisfactory. You will have to do tests. Do you know what is multi-axial loading in the context of fatigue? It is the same as multi-axial loading for the quasi-static loading, but now we are having cyclic loading, but sigma 1, sigma 2, sigma 1, 2, all of them are varying in different ways. Now that on top of multi-axial fatigue loading and that on top of orientation dependence makes it very difficult. For composite, for metals, if you had cyclic loading, you could calculate what is known as the principal stresses, and then your material is isotropic. So the strength in that principal plane is the same as the strength in any other axis. In composites, that is not the case. So it's not easy to do fatigue simulation when your part is subjected to multi-axial loading. And the problem is that even multi-axial testing is very difficult. So, and there are other challenges also. For example, R ratio, the dependence of R ratio is challenging for metals, but you have Miner's rule, Soderberg equation. For composites, those are found not to work. And since those are not found to work, that is a challenge. Nobody knows how to perfectly deal with this problem. Frequency, as I described, frequency, what happens is that at higher frequencies, your thermoplastic or thermoset, both the matrices have a tendency to get heating up. And as they heat up, their strength changes. So at high frequencies, the loading in a composite is not only due to the mechanical loads that you apply, but also due to the temperature effects or the frequency effects. So it's challenging. And then you have temperature, moisture. All of these are different problems that you are going to face, which is mild for metals, but not so mild for composite materials. Okay, good. Any questions? So this brings me to the 1-hour lecture that I have planned for fatigue of composite materials. Anybody has any question? If not, then I think we can wind this lecture up. Okay, so then this was a short lecture. Is this